Hey, what's up and welcome to 49cc Scoot. My name's Brett. A couple of weeks ago, I went to a meet and ride on my Yamaha TMAX 500. After being there for around an hour hanging out and waiting on everyone else to show up, the group was going to take the highway to a beach about 45 minutes away, but a friend on a GY6 swapped Yamaha jog wanted to take some side roads instead, so I rode with him. He said his engine was shutting off if he went too fast, but it was okay if he stayed closer to 50 miles per hour, so he didn't want to try to keep up on the highway, and he was going to meet a friend with a scooter along the way anyhow. We spent about a half an hour waiting for the third member of our scooter gang to be ready. Within 2 minutes of leaving, I gave it a little gas and it fell on its face, barely wanting to move. Even trying to get going on a very mild incline caused it to shut off. Just to be clear, I'm not working the throttle here. It's doing the surging all on its own. The best I could do was try to hold the throttle enough to keep it going around 30 miles per hour. The longer I was moving, the more speed it would let me build up. Once we got on the bridge going into Ocean City, the air was much cooler and I gained more speed before it finally stopped acting up altogether and I could ride normally again. I want to go park in the shade over there just in case. I had some tools and a jump box, so I waited with these guys just in case, but it looks like maybe a loose connection to the cordless tool battery, or maybe he was using that as a jump box. I followed these guys around, hoping that they knew where the group was and I wasn't just stalking them back to their houses or something. Somehow I never know where we're headed during these group rides. We met back up with the group by the Indian River Inlet Bridge and hung out there for about 40 minutes. I was worried that the TMAX was going to act up again, but it ran great down the highway. The other guys broke off to head into another beach town, and I kept going toward home. There's a section around Rehoboth Beach and Lewis, Delaware that is always pretty busy, and I got hung up in a little traffic there. Just when I thought I was out of the woods because I should be able to keep moving pretty well from this point on, it started surging again and lost speed. I pulled over for about 5 minutes, hoping it was on the edge of working and a quick brake may do the trick. It fooled me and worked fine for a few minutes and then started doing it again. I rode the shoulder a bit, but didn't like that very much, so I found some shade to stop again for another 5 to 10 minutes. I thought maybe if I could just keep moving, it would clear up on its own, but I was away from the cooler beach air by then, and that didn't work either, so I pulled into an empty church or sanctuary of some sort and decided to try a full 15-minute break. I could feel the heat in the gas tank, so I left the cap off and removed the little access panel for fuel pump connections as well, just hoping that it would provide some tiny amount more ventilation. Alright, it's been 15 to 20 minutes, so I guess we'll see what happens. It's still sitting in the middle of the gauge. I don't think it's cooled down that much. But... oh yeah, that's a great sounding idle. Oh yeah. Alright, it's 6 o'clock basically. Still feel heat inside the gas tank if you put your finger in there, but I'd really like to get going. Let's see. After another 30 minutes, it at least ran and could move. I knew there was a gas station about 5 miles down the road, so I wanted to try to make it there and find out if adding fuel to cool the tank would let me ride normally again. Well, it no longer feels hot when my hand is near the gas tank after 1 3/4 gallons of fresh fuel, so fingers crossed. After that, I had no trouble all the way home, even running it pretty hard. I assumed that what I experienced that day was another bout of TMAX fever. For anyone not familiar with it, TMAX fever is a name given to heat-related fueling issues that happen in 2009 to 2011 TMAX 500s. Riders typically experience surging, trouble getting up to speed, and/or poor idle on hot days. Usually this happens after riding and then parking for a while, especially when the bike sits for 30 minutes to an hour or maybe a little bit more, but sometimes it happens riding very slowly, like when you're stuck in traffic for extended periods of time, or even riding around town. The fuel tank sits right over the engine and is surrounded by fairings, so it seems that heat from the engine doesn't really have a lot of places to go, so it rises and heat soaks the fuel tank. Once the tank is hot, then the fuel pump struggles, and that's when we get the symptoms of TMAX fever. So events like the group ride where you ride and park are absolutely perfect for conjuring up TMAX fever. I rode about 40 minutes to get to the group ride and then sat in the parking lot for an hour, and the scoot ran fine after that. but struggled every other time it sat that day, which initially confused me. But later I realized that I filled up with 2.5 gallons of gas just before I parked, so the fuel helped to keep the tank cooler. The solution that cures TMAX Fever for most is to replace the entire fuel pump assembly with one from a later model TMAX. Some have replaced only the fuel pump, but it doesn't always work, and it's believed that the newer assemblies have a better design intended to fix the problem. In fact, when ordering a fuel pump for my 2011 TMAX, the part number has been replaced with one that matches the number shown for 2015 to 2016 models. I swapped out my fuel pump assembly for the newer model about 3 years and 13,000 miles ago, and all of my issues went away until recently. 3 years and 13,000 miles is not a very long life for a fuel pump, but I think that's the issue. I've got a Melosi fuel controller on this bike because I needed to correct the fueling after switching to an aftermarket exhaust and air filter, so I'm not sure if that makes the pump failure any more likely. The fuel pump is a big job on this thing because of all of the panels that have to be removed to gain access, so I wanted to see if I could help the tank stay cooler somehow while I was at it. My first thought was to add some vents to either allow air to escape from the fairings more easily or to let air pass over the tank, but most of the stuff that I saw was either cheap and poorly designed or expensive enough that I wasn't willing to buy them. A member named Sinful from the 49cc Scoot forums suggested that louvers could be cut and bent into the panels, but I gave that a quick try on a panel from another scooter that I didn't care about and got hideous results. This could be done with more care and cleaned up, but it was way too easy to wrinkle paint while heating to bend the plastic, and I didn't want to take that chance with a TMAX. Instead, I decided to wrap the tank in an adhesive-backed, heat-reflective material made by Thermo-Tec. I'll put a link in the description in case you're interested, but I found it on Amazon and it was well reviewed, so I thought it was worth a try, and it was less than $50 for two 12 by 24 inch sheets. The toughest part of the job was getting the old padding off of the tank. I used a product called Goof to make it easier to remove the sticky residue. I wiped the tank with rubbing alcohol and let it dry so the adhesive would have a clean surface to stick to. One good thing about this stuff is that the material is thin and relatively simple to install. It will wrinkle trying to get around bends, but it can be cut with scissors and then folded over. I wasn't concerned with appearance and overlap seams instead of trying for a perfect fit, so it went on pretty quickly for me. One sheet covered the bottom of the tank with only very small scraps left over. I repeated the process for the top of the tank. I had just enough to cover everything that I wanted to cover, so I'd say 2 sheets are just right for the TMAX's 4-gallon tank. I replaced the fuel pump assembly, then the job of putting the fairings back on. Along the way, I discovered a capped vent in a panel on each side. They were probably only ever intended to be decorative, but removing a few clips let me take the cover off and make them functional. With the panel installed, you can see that the vents aim toward the fuel tank. I don't think that this is going to do much, but if I can move a little more air and have an extra place for heat to escape when sitting, in addition to reflecting some of the heat with the wrap, it has to keep the tank at least a little bit cooler, and that's gotta be good for the fuel pump. There haven't been any hot days yet since it went back together, but I did take it on a 25-mile ride with a full tank on a sunny 62-degree day. I checked inside of the tank with an infrared thermometer immediately after riding, and it was 66.7 degrees at the hottest spot that I could locate. I continued to check at regular intervals for 3 hours while parked in shade, and you can see that the tank gets hotter and hotter for about 2 hours before it finally started losing a little heat the last hour. I wish I had done the same test without the heat reflecting material to compare, but at least this shows why sitting after a ride is a major factor for TMAX Fever. I took a quick 10-mile, 15-minute ride right after my last check to see how that changed temperature, and it dropped about 2 degrees to 80.3, so it didn't cool a lot. There are quite a few variables here. I think the amount of fuel in the tank and the ambient temp could significantly change how the tank soaks up and releases heat, and I'd guess that without wrap the tank would probably take on heat much more quickly. The best that I can say for now is so far so good, and fingers crossed that I don't ever have to deal with TMAX Fever again and fuel pumps will last longer. That's it for this episode, so if you've enjoyed it or found it helpful, please tap the like button and don't forget to subscribe for more scooter related content. Plus, if I have any more trouble with TMAX Fever, I'll keep you updated. Thank you for watching.